The multiverse is covered in mud. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Clayface. Basil Karlo was a famous actor known primarily for his roles in horror films. However, when replaced as the lead in a movie, he went mad with rage. His life began to take a strange path when he injected himself with a formula that altered his body completely, making him a dangerous shapeshifter made of living clay who can change his physical form however he chooses. With the ability to adopt the appearance of anyone or anything, Clayface has become one of Batman's most powerful enemies. Before we feast our eyes on this feat of clay, maybe the first thing we probably should do is figure out how tall the DC Rebirth Clayface stands. In order to do that, of course, we're going to grab the ruler. And going from the bottom of his feet to the top of his back, Clayface stands an impressive 9 inches in height, or about 23 centimeters tall. To put in proper perspective just how much Clayface that is, we can bring in a typical Batman figure. This one happened to come from the Three Jokers line, one of my favorite Batman figures we've gotten so far. Freeing up also a little bit of space on the other side of him would be also a prime opportunity to bring in my favorite figure in my collection. Several of you already know the direction that we're going to be going with this. We're going to bring in, for comparisons, and another Clayface after all. Here's what he looks like next to the DC Superheroes Clayface. My all-time favorite figure, who, by the way, has still held up pretty good. His rubbery arms have yet to degrade. I might even have to try to pick up another one of those. I think I already have like 3 DC superhero Clayfaces, probably picking up another one to keep it sealed on card. But in the case of this, comparing the Clayfaces, the Clayface that I like, my favorite from the DC superheroes, goes to about maybe the biceps section of the brand new Clayface from McFarlane Toys. On to stands and trading cards, as Clayface comes included with both. Quite comical, though. The figure comes included with your traditional standard-sized display stand, which in I think case like this, first of all, Clayface is fine to stand on his own. He does not need the use of a display stand. I think also as well, if you're going to be creating these mega-sized figures, then I think you should also mega-size the display stand, being at least half the size or even double the size of what we're getting right now. Because if you take the figure and you put the stand underneath it, the whole 1 foot pretty much envelops the entire display stand. And I don't really think at all it improves his standing at all. The figure's got wide enough tree trunk-sized feet that he really doesn't even need this. I think in even a case like this, I would have just left the display stand off altogether, and if anything, used that plastic for something other than a display stand. That being said, the figure also comes included with a trading card. And though we are getting figure photography, they have altered the photography slightly. Full disclosure, the figure's eyes do not actually light up like headlights to a car. They've just done that after the fact. I do like the background that they did choose for Clayface. It sort of looks like he's somewhere underground in a sewer system, a rather fitting place for a character like Clayface. On the back of the card, the real name is Basil Karlo. A read-up as well, a paragraph read that you can either pause and read for yourself, or if you prefer, again, to have somebody read it for you, like books on tape. Then this sultry voice was the very same thing that was reading this at the very beginning of this review. You're welcome. This is also from the DC Rebirth comic run, although it's really just a traditional-looking Clayface, tweaked slightly, but still a lot of the checked-off boxes that a traditional Clayface would be. A little side note, by the way, a quick short story, because I know you have places to go people need to see. My very first comic I ever picked up as a kid, I think it was in grade 6. It was the Mud Pack, Detective Comics Mud Pack, issue 2 of 4. Notably, the front cover had Batman's costume and cowl, with all the Clayface mud running out of it. Does anybody have the Mud Pack 2 of 4? I also have the rest of the Mud Pack, but that was the very first. So I have a real attachment to Clayface. I'm going to move, by the way, this card to the side. I would love to see at some point McFarlane Toys, considering they really have now started to go back, cover off some territory of older comic runs. I would love them to start doing a vintage run and even doing the entire Mud Pack group. Lady Clayface and all the other Clayface members. With that being said, finally, I know we've taken enough time of your... I've taken enough of your ample time. I won't do it any further. We're going to go ahead and pick the figure up right now. Clayface is comprised of several different types of plastic. His main arms, for example, are more harder plastic, whereas when you get to things like his torso, his tummy tum-tum, as you can see, it's got more of a softer plastic. And then you sort of got more of a hollow plastic here for the top casing of his torso. So it's hard plastic here, hollow plastic there, and softer plastic in his tummy tum-tum area. Head sculpt is pretty good. I have to say, though, I prefer the head sculpt with the mouth closed myself. Getting a lot of the images, seeing it online, and certainly getting him out of the packaging, his mouth was already open. I'm going to go ahead and open up his mouth right now. Now, his mouth is fine for the idea of opening up, but I feel it makes the mouth and the face too long. Again, I like at least the idea, and I did actually have to put a fair bit of pressure on the mouth to get the mouth to actually close shut. Inside, you'll see a quite gruesome-looking sight. Several individual chiclets of teeth and a full row of it down below. It really does have a sagging mouth as well, as if he's probably holding himself some marshmallows inside of there. Chubby bunny, chubby bunny. Chubby bunny. Again, I like the idea. At least it does have articulation, so we're not stuck on settling with the idea of his mouth being open. I prefer to have it closed myself. It simply is just on a hinge joint. You close it shut like that. At least closing it like this, it looks a little more like my traditional favorite Clayface, the one from the DC Superheroes line. The coloring is pretty good. It's kind of really more of a dark, I don't want to say bathroom type of brown. I mean, that would be the best, certainly, way to describe it. Why I say that, though, is as I move this over, I'm going to bring in the original Clayface, so the DC Superheroes variety, and it definitely has a much more reddish sort of clay coloring that I wish this sort of coloring could also have been transferred over to this type of coloring, as this Clayface certainly is a lot more, well, we'll stick with more the idea of a cleaner sand color. Sand colors work a lot better than describing it as bathroom browns. Get into marketing. One thing that's rather interesting, though, about his body, I don't know if it's certainly just Easter eggs or I'm just starting to look for stuff myself, but it sort of looks like his body is made up of little tiny skulls and things that you can point out. Like there's a skull right here on the top of his torso, at least what I can see. Seems to be like a little face off to the side that kind of looks, in fact, like, it kind of looks a little like Mickey Mouse's skull. And one thing that was rather interesting is off to the side, it looked like two shrieking faces. I'm sure they probably threw those in there deliberately with the idea that they were supposed to look like skulls, and it's not just a random concoction. Several different just molded things come together where it makes me think that there's something that really isn't actually there. It's really neat the way that they've actually added some nice spikes on the sides of his arms. Now, this can be a little bit more difficult when it comes to bending his elbows. First of all, he doesn't have much joint to really work with, but even when you are bending the arm, you're going to be pricking yourself this whole time, as there's all these protruding spikes sticking out from his forearms. He actually has some rather interesting spikes on the back, with very obvious, I have to say, that's very obvious placement of skulls, shrieking, as you can see on the back of his torso. Again, knock knock, who's there? This all is hard plastic, and it even feels like hard plastic, hard, hollow plastic when you're tapping it, when you're moving it around. But of course, they probably would have had to do that in order to encase all the articulation into it that we will be looking at shortly. Colors are pretty good in blending with one another. There are certain aspects where, like the top of his torso, seem a lot more lighter of a color, just by the nature of the type of plastic they probably use. And then the arms are closer in color to his head sculpt and his lower legs. And then sort of in that midriff area is where he's got kind of a more matte finish plastic. Because again, they're using the softer plastic to hide the joints inside. Nice big mangling hands of Clayface. Not that far different really than the Clayface that we had looked at earlier several times here on this channel. Several, again, skulls that you can see there on his elbows. I see a couple of other skulls there again on the side, which we already looked at earlier. There's like really a lot of interesting stuff going on here for Clayface outside and above and beyond just having a melting looking character. Talking a little bit about the articulation for the figure. Now, there is technically a ball joint. There is one going on behind the scenes here. I'll tell you right now, though, I had some serious difficult time moving the head. It does not want to budge. I've taken the hairdryer. That's the sound of a hairdryer. I've tried submerging this also in hot water. Not the easiest thing to do because, of course, his head is so encased in the shell of his torso. But fighting it, it seems like there's resistance to the point where I'm worried that I'm going to break the ball joint. He does have, of course, mouth articulation, so you can open and close that. That's, again, I'm going to stick to the idea of maybe, if anything, keeping just a little bit of gap. A little bit of opening of the doorway here. So it's not fully closed, but it's not fully open either. You get a little bit still of the detailing done on the inside of his mouth. As for his arms do come out. Now, they are loose. Both the arms actually are loose. They do come out at about a 90-degree angle bend, maybe just a little less than that. And you can also, of course, take the arms and you can rotate them all the way around. The thing about it, though, is there's a lot of stuff sticking out here on the top of his torso. So as you are rotating, you're going to really easily find yourself hitting some snags along the way. But his arms do technically rotate all the way around. You really do experience like the hollowness of the figure happening here when you really are starting to move his arms. You can probably even hear it for yourself. Providing, of course, I'm not going to be talking all this time. The figure does have a arm swivel, which also there's a joint in his elbow, but good luck trying to bend it. I don't know if you can even see it, but there's the hinge joint right there. It's almost non-existent. You can kind of bend the elbow, but not really by much, though. He does have a hand swivel back and forth, or getting in there, and you can hinge the hand back and forth. But again, everything's really tight in the figure. You can rotate the wrist, which is nice. Upper torso is on a very generous ball joint. And I guess it is a good thing that they did put the rubbery plastic in there. I don't suspect that this will be something that's being degrading over time. But there's also a secondary ball joint sort of at the bottom base of the sludgy tummy here. And of course, he's got, when it comes to his legs, ball hinge joints. Luckily, don't giving me any of the problems I had with Swamp Thing. Check out the review if you don't know what I'm talking about. The legs go forward, the legs go back. He does have a bend in the knee. Also allows the lower leg to rotate, and that's it. He doesn't have any additional foot articulation. But keeping the tree trunks the way that they are, at least the figure makes for a pretty stable looking figure. That again, you don't necessarily need to use this. It's redundant, it's unnecessary. And again, if they are really going to be releasing all these mega-sized figures, we are of course going to also be looking at the mega-scale Titan Joker in an upcoming review. Still, though, I think like figures of that size, do away with this. Either use this amount of plastic to include an accessory for the figure, or if anything, just increase the size of this to giving it at least, like the Grinch, grew 3 times that size that day. Make the stands a little bit bigger. It would make more sense, because really, if you're going to be putting this underneath Clayface's feet, first of all, it's not going to improve his stability, and second of all, the display stand's only going to be lost underneath the melted candle wax foot, the bottom base of Clayface's feet. While I do think that McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Clayface does do Clayface a lot better than that Build-A-Figure Clayface that we got years prior under another DC Multiverse banner, I still don't think it dethrones my favorite Clayface, the DC Superheroes. That Clayface, in my eyes, is almost perfect, except for the rubbery arms. At one point, the figure was going to get a re-release packaged along with a clay-covered Batman, and they were actually going to do away with the rubbery arms in favor of a jointed plastic arm instead. And as anyone who would have picked up that Clayface 2-pack with Batman realized, well, it was pretty much the same figure as we already gotten already with the rubbery arms. That would be the only thing I would change that Clayface. The coloring is right there. I love the sculpting, and the head sculpt is fantastic on it. To the credit of the McFarlane Toys one, it comes pretty close to that. Maybe would have changed, if anything, the color, and maybe made it a little more of a reddish clay than that sort of sandy brown that they decided to settle with. Some of the plastic doesn't quite gel in all of the areas. You can really even see it here as the figure spins around in the rotisserie that the arms, the legs, and the head are all of the shinier plastic. The hollow plastic that they use for the top of the torso is more of a matte finish, and then you kind of got that rubbery plastic in his mid-torso area. But at least you can write it off that it is Clayface. Parts of his body would be probably comprised a little bit differently, and it would make him a little bit more sense that he probably doesn't have all the same consistent color. I mean, hey, the original DC Superheroes Clayface also didn't have consistent color from head to toe. This figure, to its credit, does have at least a hinge to its jaw, which I thought would have only been the deal breaker to picking up this figure. Was I didn't like the idea of his mouth being always permanently open, but in actual fact, as you saw in this review, there is a hinge joint on the bottom of his jaw that you can open and close his mouth to get it to look that you want. I may meet it somewhere in the middle, so not having his mouth completely open and barren like you see on the back of the packaging, and not completely closed shut either, leaving a little bit of a gap wide open so you can see all the work that they sculpted on the inside of the figure. It's not close to being perfect as the DC Superheroes variety, but it's a pretty close to being perfect Clayface released by McFarlane Toys. I really like how this one turned out. Did you guys get the chance to pick up yet the DC Rebirth Clayface? If you have, certainly let me know down below in the comment section, or just really based on this review and this review alone. Is this a figure that you would certainly pick up if you haven't already done so? Also, if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below, turn on the bell notification, and yeah, keep your peepers peeled. While we have wrapped up the review for Clayface, there will be more McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse reviews coming your way in the not-so-distant future. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.